Welcome to the Expected Buffalo Postgame Show, brought to you by One Pie Pizza at onepiepizza.com and Hiller and Comerford, hillercomerford.com, 1866 Hiller Law for your local personal injury disability go-to. I think this is the first postgame that we're doing here after a loss, so had to get that one in eventually. And tonight is that night. It's a bummer that it comes, with 3 weeks between games, and in the fashion that it did too. It wasn't a, eventful game where it was fun and exciting. It was a rough one. It was the worst game they've probably played since the beginning of December. So, it's kind of the game you hoped going into the break you weren't going to have to deal with. But here we are. So, we're going to go through it. We'll talk about the bad of tonight, a couple other topics from tonight's game. And then at the end, we'll kind of step back and look at the big picture to maybe talk some of you off the ledge if needed be, and get a kind of a full view of where we are here and how much this would have to go off the rails for them really not to push this over the finish line and break the playoff drought. But we'll save that to the end. So let's get into the nitty gritty of the game here. Like I said, bad game overall. You look at the numbers that I posted from Natural Stat Trick. 60% expected goal share in favor of the Penguins. 52 shot share in favor of the Penguins. The Sabres really were, leading the expected goal share, believe it or not, a 5-on-5 through 2 periods. But, they got back into it in the third. But I thought at 5-on-5 they were pretty poor. The numbers reflected that. They never really had any quality opportunities to get something past Sheeloffs. Maybe they had one or two. But they went wide, or I think he really had to make one good save in that period. I think he really only had to make one or two solid saves the entire night. And the unfortunate part is, like, when the puck got there, he was fighting it. He was battling. He was leaving rebounds. So, the Zucker goal wasn't the best one either. And even the Thompson goal, you sneak that in from the corner there. So 2 goals that really weren't that good. That kind of leaves you to believe, he wasn't on his game, but they didn't take advantage of it. And the Penguins did. They're a veteran team with some younger players that are hungry, and they wanted it more, and they took it. And that's kind of the way it goes sometimes over an 82-game stretch. You have these nights. You don't love it; they're not fun, but it's important to keep a level head on it all, right? And I know it's hard. You live game by game, you live period by period, moment by moment. To take a step back and try to, not get too carried away in the moment. And, I don't know if there's really much I can add into it beyond that. But like I said, it was overall bad. The passing wasn't there. I thought their speed wasn't really there. The forecheck was poor. It just wasn't as aggressive as it usually is. And maybe that can go into not having Benson in your lineup. Maybe that can go to tired legs. And it's weird because in the beginning of the game, I felt like it was there, and they were just missing chances. And then halfway to the first period, it went away, and then never really came back. So, it's uncommon for this team. Usually they eventually find their game, and they just never really did. The exits out of the defensive zone I thought were pretty bad. It's not so much in the sense they were hemmed in for long portions. It was the passes were off the mark, which then resulted in turnovers and giving the puck back to the Penguins. So, it felt like for a lot of this game, it was just continually giving the puck back. It felt like a little bit like these Sabres at the beginning of the season, where you never really had possession. You'd get it out of your zone, and then you'd flip it in and change and give it back. Or you'd have a turnover in the neutral zone. There would be a one-and-done opportunity in the offensive zone. It's just wasn't there. It looked sloppy. It looked disorganized. It looked messy. And I get not having Benson is a big deal. I think we can all pretty much understand that at this point and take that as something how important he is to their forecheck, their playing style, making them deeper and more difficult to play against. But you got to be able to bring it. A lot of teams don't have players right now. A lot of injuries. The Penguins didn't have Raquel or Letang the other night. The Lightning didn't have Point or Surelli or Paul. So everybody's going through it. Everybody's battling not having some key players. It can't be an excuse, and I understand it. But you got to push through. And to be fair, for the most part, they've done a lot without Josh Norris in their lineup. There's been some other guys that have been in and out. Kesselring, who we'll get to in a minute, has been one of such players. So, I don't want to completely bash them over for not being able to win games while you have players out. So I don't want to have that vibe, if you will. But it's not an excuse that I'm really going to kind of take a lot of into tonight. As for the performance, I just think they didn't have it. They didn't play well, and you needed your goaltender maybe to give you a couple saves. He didn't, and I'm not going to kill him. They only scored 2 goals. Even if he makes one, if he stops one of those, you still probably lose this game. You just didn't produce enough offensively, I think, to be an impact team or much of a difference here. Whether your goaltender, stopped a couple free or not, I'm not sure it would have been enough the way the team in front of him was playing tonight. So, and I didn't even mention the missed nets. Like, that's the other crazy part of the game, right? They had opportunities, especially in the first period. I was kind of thinking as the first half of the first period was going along is, man, you're missing a lot of opportunities here. You're not capitalizing. You're not finishing. They got that goal early from Zucker, but really you didn't build on it and make the lead instead of just 1-2 or maybe even 3. You let the Penguins hang around. They come down. Make it 1-1, and before you're out of the first period, you're down 2-1. So, yeah, you gotta finish those opportunities. And this is a good finishing team overall. So, it's again, you have to remember to kind of stay within the moment and keep the big picture in mind that sometimes it's just not your night. And this was unfortunately one of them. The next thing I wanted to get into is the power play. Like, it's weird because I think in the broadcast they said like they've scored a power play going 4, now tonight be 5 games in a row. So they're they were 1 for 5 tonight. But I think they have a power play goal now in 4 or 5 straight games, which realistically you're like, okay, that's not bad. That's pretty decent, but it's just it never looks great, right? The first one tonight with the entries, like, my goodness, how many times are you going to try the same thing they keep picking off? They know you're trying to go across ice. They know you're trying to skate through them. Stop doing it. Did it 5 or 6 times and win 1 power play. It gets back to there's not a lot of plan Bs. There's a plan A, which isn't really good. And then there's nothing else that comes of it. And kind of all their power play goals, if you look at them recently, the ones they've had, you go all the way back, there's, you got one bouncing off a pinball on 2 guys. You got another one going off a stick in Toronto. Tages tonight's a shot from, the wall where he just walks out and just shoots it from the corner. Your one in Tampa Bay, the Doan one that could have won you the game, that was a nice play. But, it's continues to be a thing that it's got to overall be better for you. At the very least, you got to be able to build some momentum off of it. Like, I feel like it's a drainer instead of a momentum build. So even if you don't score, you build the chances, and you kind of feel like you got the other team on the ropes a little bit, and then you get back on 5-on-5, you can keep that pressure on, where most times it's the opposite. They're going at 5-on-5 to draw a penalty, and then you kind of get into the mud of that power play that isn't good, and then you got to work your way out of it and reestablish your play at 5-on-5 again. So it's not even so much the scoring for me; it's building off of it. It's creating momentum. It's keeping your foot on the gas, and they just haven't been able to do it. And you got 2.5 weeks here to self-evaluate, to look at your power play, figure out what you have to do to get it going. I don't know if they're going to be able to figure out an answer. This coaching staff hasn't figured out an answer in 2 years on that power play to get it going to look respectable. So, I'm not confident 2.5 weeks is going to change anything by any means. But I mean, it's something looking forward to the playoffs that like I just hope in April and May we're not sitting here and being like, man, they were the better team at 5-on-5, but their power play let them down, their special teams let them down, and that's why they lost that series. It'll be unfortunate. If that's something that we've seen coming all along and then comes to fruition in the postseason, that to hold them back. So I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything this season, and it's for me, it's not a player thing. It's not a personnel issue. I just don't think they are structured or have a good enough plan to break down the opponent to be an effective unit. And I'm not asking top 5 in the league by any means. Like just, average, just slightly above average, I'll take that. But like I said, just looking dangerous, threatening, and it's not 2 minutes of essentially clock killing whenever you're out there because you can't really even get going. All right, where are we going to go next? Let's go defensemen, particularly the bottom of the defense group tonight. Jacob Bryson, 4 minutes and 2 huge mistakes that end up in the back of your net. It's like I said, it only took 4 minutes of playing time for that to happen, and it's just, you can't have it. You can't have it. I thought Metsä has been good enough to remain in that spot. I didn't see the need to force Bryson back in there, especially when they've gone stretches of 25 or so games when he hasn't played, why they felt the need to jam him back in there. And, that's maybe a lineup decision that you paid for it because he did that. And then his defense partner, Kesselring, man, like, I'm trying to be not as hard on him, I guess is the words I want to use, understanding the injury that he's going through and that it continues to be an issue, and 2.5 weeks off here probably will help him to get healthier, maybe the healthiest he's been all season. But look, like, there's maybe 3 periods, maybe 1 full game that I could sit here and say that I have liked the way Kesselring has played. And that 1 or 2 games, that couple of periods have been when they were with power for the most part. So I don't know, maybe you have to go back to that after the break. And I get Lindy's really leaning on his top 4 right now, Byron Power, Samuelson, and Dahlin. So that could be hard to do because you don't want to take those minutes away from Power, who's playing pretty well right now and, can arguably be one of your best defensemen right now, which is kind of crazy to say, but he has been the last month of the season at least. To put those minutes on Kesselring because you want Power to get those minutes. But, if that gets him to a level of being a more impactful player, then maybe you have to consider that. It's just, Kevin Adams isn't here, so I don't want to say, Adam, whoever is lucky that Doan turned out to be who he is. But, if Doan didn't turn out to be who he has been, this would look like a pretty rough trade. Kesselring was supposed to be the prime piece in that deal. And I don't know. Again, I'm just hoping that it's the ankle leg injury that's holding him back. This season may not ever be that good at what he could be. And, maybe next year, if he's healthy, it'll look different. But that brings me to the overall point here of, look, you probably need a depth defenseman in here, and you're probably going to need one quickly. Now, the trade deadline is only a couple of weeks after the season begins again. So any move will have to be quickly when the freeze opens back up. But, you're going to get Connor Timmins back, I guess. Short, maybe not right away, but, shortly after the break is over. But, like, can you rely upon that? I mean, how is he going to recover from a broken leg? It's not like he's Now, like, he's a world beater by any means. I mean, he was a good penalty kill guy for them, but there was some issues for him at 5-on-5. I just feel like they need to get a depth defenseman in here. No, I'm not talking a depth defenseman that is just another version of Peyton Krebs or Zach Metza. I think you probably have to get a little bit above that. Because you can't continue to lean on this top four the way he has been. The schedule is going to remain compact coming out of the break. You got to get somebody else who gives you more than 8 minutes a night on that third pair. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. You're going to run this group into the ground. Can you maybe get away with it for another 20 to 25 games? And that's all they're going to have left coming out of the break. Maybe, probably, for what they need to get to. They could probably get enough points out of that. But in the playoffs, I mean, again, you're going to be run into the ground when the playoffs come around. So you got to get somebody who's going to give you 10 to 12 minutes at least, respectable down there, that you can give your top four a breather and a break. And it's something Yarmo's got to look at. And I know they are, right? I know they're out there looking. I know they've looked at depth forwards and depth defensemen. They've had conversations. So, I could sit here and today I'm confident that they'll probably do something to address that. It would have been nice if it was already, but at the same time, I get this team is doing what they're doing. You don't want to rock the boat too much, and all of that. It all is fair and valid. But yeah, I think this game kind of showed you a couple things that this team needs to improve upon. The depth defenseman, I think they need probably another forward in the middle six or bottom six of their lineup. I know you're going to get Danforth back and you're going to get Norris back for how many ever games that'll be, whether it's 5 or 26, who knows with him. But, I mean, that's part of the equation too, right? When you're going into building out your roster over the next, couple weeks you're going to have before the deadline when the freeze opens, you have to take a long look in the mirror about Norris. And, yeah, he's on your roster, and if he plays, he's in. But I think you have to put some insurance in here and do something that if another injury happens, that you're not in a terrible position and you have a guy you brought in that can help this team, whoever it is. So I think that's got to be under, consideration here too. I think it's already been almost 20 minutes. So let's go to the big picture we're at here. Okay. We're living in the moment. Bad game. You lost 2 in a row when you include the Tampa game. You lost 3 of 4 when you go back to Montreal. I understand all of that. But let's look at where you are. You're 5 points clear of the first non-playoff team in the Eastern Conference sitting in Wild Card 1. You're 2 points out of second place in the Atlantic with a game in hand still on Detroit. I gave one back tonight. They still have your game in hand on the Red Wings to catch them potentially. Montreal's only 2 points ahead of you too. Beyond Columbus, who's kind of made a run here, the Capitals are also 5 points back, but they've played 2 more games than the Sabres. They would really have to kind of go on a run here. And then your next team is Ottawa at 63, 7 points back with the same amount of games played. Like, there's a reason, folks, that you look around at playoff percentage odds and it's 75, 80, 90. It's not often you see teams with 25 games left down even 3 points creep their way into the playoffs. It's difficult to make up that ground. And for a team like Ottawa or Toronto or Florida, you have to hop multiple teams to do so. Even the Capitals got to jump teams. Columbus, maybe they're closer and their better chance might be in the Metro to get their way into a playoff spot that way. So it's all things to consider. And my objective right, for this team is to get to 100 points. And to get to 100 points with the remaining 25 games, they would need to go 14-9-2. They would need to acquire 30 of the next 50 points on 30 of the remaining 50 points on the board. That's a 600 winning percentage. Since January 1st, they've gone 11-4-2. That's a 705. They haven't lost more than 2 games in a row since December 8th. Like, I get it. It's 14 years. You've seen some stuff. Everybody wants this this streak, this playoff drought to end so badly. But I think you really got to understand how good of a spot they're in. Like, for Columbus to catch them to get to 100 points, let's say, Columbus would need to have, I think almost a 700 points percentage the rest of the way down. They've won 7 in a row. I get it, sure. But, that's just to catch the Sabres. It's, they can catch any of the other teams. And, if the Sabres get to 100 points and then, the other teams around you have to follow path. For me, I'm not really focused on the behind. That's why I set my focus on a goal of, okay, the goal is 100 points. If you get to 100 points and you don't make the playoffs, I don't think that's ever happened. 2, if that does happen, what are you supposed to do? I don't know. Go lay in the street. I don't know what you're supposed to do. So if you get to 100 points, you're 100% in. So don't worry about what's happening behind you. Focus on where you have to go to get to. Because if you get to that point, what happens behind you doesn't matter. Because nobody's going to probably catch you if you get to that number. So, I just think just take a breath, go into the break here. They're in a great spot. It seems like everybody keeps waiting for the bottom to fall out of this thing. We're 57 games into the season. They're a 61% points percentage team. The 57 games are more important than the last 3. This is who they are. There's no, oh, here it comes. This is the team that they are. They're a good team. They're going to also be getting healthier, by the way, getting players back to improve and be an even stronger team than they were when they were winning all these games. And again, they're not easy games. It's not like they, ran over cupcake teams when you go through this. You look at some of their wins and who they beat. There were some difficult games in that they won on the road for most of them. So, take your breath. I understand, the anxiousness, the nervousness. I think they kick off coming out of the break, on the road. Just settle in. Enjoy it. Because this is the first time in a while that we've really had this opportunity to be 100% alive, and not only alive, but in the driver's seat in a playoff race, and enjoy a good team that is on the rise, that is battling in a difficult conference. I think that's maybe the more impressive thing is you're fighting your way and coming through in an Eastern Conference in a division that looks really good. So I think this reset comes at a good time for all of us. We can take a step back. We can evaluate some things, have some discussions, talk about some trade stuff here while we all enjoy the Olympics. Not only the ice hockey, but also the other sports too. That we get once every 4 years. He's on the winter side. So yeah, I think that's it. 25 minutes. That'll be the longest post-game show I've done so far. But I appreciate everybody for listening. The podcast are going to continue. The content on the site's going to continue. There's no vacation break, any of that coming here. It'll be a good time to evaluate players, positions, trade stuff, numbers behind this team where they are, and have some good conversations. And then be on our way for the stretch run for the final 25 games of the season. We pick things back up at the end of February. All right. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate it, and we will talk again soon. See ya.